Hi, I'm State Senator James Eldridge, and happy to have a Beacon Hill update, my regular update about what's going on at the State House as well as the district that I represent. Really happy to be doing this show at WAVM in Maynard, part of Maynard High School. And my guest is Jeff Swanberg, now chair of the Maynard Select Board. So Jeff, congratulations on being chair.
Thank you.
And this is your second term, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in my second term and
Yep.
second time I've been chair, so second time through that cycle as well.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And we've known each other for many years, I think going back to when you served on the Maynard Cultural Council.
That's right.
And made the leap to Select Board. And certainly at this time in our country's history, the importance of people running for office and serving and giving back is more important than ever. And just curious, because I know you didn't grow up in Maynard, and just curious, how long you've lived in Maynard and sort of how you started getting involved in civic activities or local issues.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Holden, which is not too far away, and so proud product of Massachusetts public education. And I went away from my education, became a scientist, and came back about 10 years ago to Massachusetts, and was real happy to come back to the state and to be re-engaged. A lot of friends and family here, and rented for a bit. When I was able to buy a house, looking for communities, I came right here to Maynard and just loved everything about it. It is a very unique place.
It is.
It's got a culture, it's got a small town feel, it's got that density of not just a literal density, but a community density that's brought from the historic mill town aspect of it compared to some of the more dispersed, more agricultural based communities around it. So I decided to buy a house here in Maynard and really establish myself here. And then one of the first weekends I was here, walked down to the farmer's market, and the chair of the cultural council at the time, Tim Hess, was saying he was going to have a party and hosted by the cultural council, and invited me to help with the planning and things like that. And I was looking to get more involved in the community. I had just got a house in, and so joined him, and we were in the Basin, now Naylor Court, and he wanted to project up on the wall there a mural to show people what that could look like, and we did. And you'll notice there's a mural now there today, and it took a few years to get that done. But after that, I joined the Cultural Council. Before I knew it, they were like, "Jeff, you're good with numbers. I'm the treasurer." Before I knew it, they were, "Jeff, chair stepping down. Do you want to be the chair?" And now I'm chairing a Cultural Council. So
that is great.
That was my initial entry into local politics, just looking to get involved. And there's plenty of opportunities there back then and still today for people who want to step up and help make the decisions for their community and improve life for people.
That is great. So it happened pretty quickly then for you after you bought your house.
Surprisingly quickly, yeah. So, and that's just part of that's the enthusiasm from Tim Hess and the rest of the Cultural Council at that time. So a great group of people, and many of them are still active in different ways here in Maynard. Yeah.
And certainly on the cultural front, I think that's been such a critical part of the attractiveness of Maynard with art galleries and the cultural opportunities. Obviously, Art Space Maynard, which you and I have partnered with to bring it to downtown. So I think that's a real piece that attracts a lot of residents to come to Marlboro.
Yeah, a rebirth, reflourishing as they've moved from their former home into their new spot downtown, which really puts them down into the heart of the downtown community even more so than they were. Sanctuary, many artists in the community, a lot of great musicians. There's a musical history from recording studios back in the day here in Maynard that is, if you just look around, it's untapped, but it's coming back through Sanctuary and a lot of other venues.
Sure.
And that Cultural Council now, and then the Cultural District I have to mention, which is a state program, which we can bring in more funding and more programming. And it's just been great as I stepped onto the Select Board to see that Cultural Council and Cultural District, the people there, some fresh energy, some people have been there for a while. They're continuing that. They're building in new programs. We've got a winter festival now where there's ice sculptures happening, and I think we've done that twice a year. There's a jazz festival touching on that musical legacy. We've done that once at Sanctuary because of the weather, and once outdoor at Veterans Memorial. There's a Pride Festival. We held our first bocce tournament earlier.
That's great.
There's the summer concert series, which the Maynard Community Band puts on. The library does one concert there as well.
Right. Film festival, right?
The film festivals,
Fine Arts
exactly.
Theater.
There's countless other things I'm I'm forgetting beyond that, but that's just a taste of a lot of the great programming that various groups put on. The Maynard Business Alliance, the holiday stroll, the tree lighting, the menorah lighting.
Yep.
You know, we'll
Maynard
run out of
Fest.
time if I just keep going down. Maynard Fest, yeah, Sarah Cressy and all the great work she does as well. So it's a very active town. All the parades, we don't have time to list all the parades that we have in time, but just you know, a
Recently
lot of
the holiday parade.
yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yep.
The holiday
Yep.
parade, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Sesquicentennial. We try to run that every 150 years when we can. So a lot of fun. Just a lot of people behind all those events, planning and helping and getting involved. And then all of the other groups that you discover, the community gardeners. If you've had time to spend with them, it's a great group of people, and they're just so active. You can look at them on Facebook. One of the most positive Facebook communities I know out there is the community gardeners, and there's a million other little groups in town that you find that are really pitching in to help make things better.
That is great. That is great. And so you served your time Maynard Cultural Council, and then at some point you decided
Makes it
to
sound so
not
down.
that it was in prison,
yeah.
but you proudly served your time.
It was a lot of fun.
with great joy. And then at some point you decided to run for Select Board.
Yeah.
And how did you decide that? Because I will say it's one thing to serve on a sort of town committee, but then to often be sort of the face of a whole host of issues, whether school committee or Select Board is often another challenge.
Yeah, and you know, I've been a career scientist and an engineer, but I've always been interested in politics, and that's been kind of an underlying thread for me personally. And as an engineer, I like to take processes and make them better, right? That's, you know, find ways to improve things, you know, whether it's more on a scientific, but, you know, it's something, taking these ideas and getting them to work physically in the real world where it's impacting
Right.
people's lives for the better.
We could use more of that on Beacon Hill. So, yes.
I understand that. So, and there's a lot of things that are inefficient that could be run more efficiently, right? So we're always looking for ways to improve. But you know, I already described how I kind of stepped up, even just on the Cultural Council, to the treasurer, to the chair of that group. And you know, once you're the chair, every once in a while you're presenting the Select Board. Here's the pitch. You know, we could use relatively small amounts of funding compared to, you know, some of the budget topics we work on, but for, you know, murals. And I worked with my unfortunately lately departed friend Eric Hansen, and just want to credit his great work in getting the 2 initial murals up. That was a big project that we had worked together on, and you'll see the Babe Ruth mural and the Hummingbird mural down at where 27 comes into town right there. And you know, we presented to the Select Board on that topic and on several others to get these sorts of things, a lot of the programs I mentioned happening. And I started attending more Select Board meetings, and I started looking at kind of the thought process. And you know, of course, when I joined town, came to town meetings, and I'm starting to think to myself, I could do that. Like, why are they making this decision versus that decision? And starting to talk to people more.
So you actually attended Select Board meetings, because that's actually pretty rare, even for people who run for those seats.
Yes, well, and I started out just attending when I was a Cultural Council chair, just the topics, but stay on for the ones before and after, and that grows your interest, and then you kind of figure out what the topics look like and get a little bit more involved that way. Budgeting is a big driving force. It's not something that people often have a passion for, but it is foundational. You need to do it, and I do, and it's something I have done more in my career and with the Select Board. And I even mentioned treasurer was where I stepped up onto on the Cultural Council, and that's a big part of how we express our moral values is through the budget, and it's a big conversation every year. So that was certainly an interesting thing to me as I looked at years of town meetings and how those comments go and how that workflow goes and how people get frustrated or are happy depending on the results for their things. But to go back to your question, since we drifted a little bit, piecing all those together, I had also done some work with you for the Democratic Party. Select Board's an independent position, but just got involved. We did a panel series on healthcare. I don't know if you remember that. Back in the day, and a few other things. And so talking with individuals and seeing public servants like yourself, was encouraging to me. And I just put it all together, and when an opening from Melissa Levine-Pirro, when she stepped down, I was talking to her, and she also, I had a conversation. She's like, yeah, you could do this. I've seen you. I've seen how you present things. And so a few key conversations with people like that gave me the confidence I need to say that, yeah, this is something I could do.
Sure.
Put a campaign together, and I ran. And
Yeah.
what I didn't realize at the time is that 2 months after I kind of launched my campaign is a global pandemic would break out. So that put an interesting
Yeah.
twist on starting your first campaign.
And how to campaign, right?
But
Yeah.
it was a fun one, and I won, and here I am today, another term later, and
Yeah.
it's been a fun and exciting ride, and we'll talk about from there to here
Yeah.
in just a few seconds.
And I would just say, I'm so glad you mentioned Melissa Levine Pirro and her encouraging, because I think that's one thing that's so critical for elected officials, whatever position that they are in, is to, encourage more people to run, to in many ways seek out, who would be best in the future, for this elected position. So that's great that she did that.
And it's something I do, and it's not the most publicly visible thing, but I'm always talking to people who are especially, beyond just the select board. There's the group of, about 40 or so people who are highly active on all these different committees
on
and
those
boards,
committees, right.
sometimes serving in multiple positions or sometimes particularly active. And so, talking to individuals, seeing, if they're interested in running someday, or making sure they understand what the role is if, people are interested. So if you're not involved and you want to get involved in one of these boards and committees, there's a lot of openings, lots of different room for different backgrounds to come in and contribute. And then, especially for people who've got a lot of experience and think they can do it, I'm always happy to have a conversation to say, this is what it's, like, it's not free. It takes a lot of my personal time and energy. It's one of the most important things I do with my free time, but it's well worth it if you can make it work, and if you have the freedom in your life to devote the time and the energy to it. It's an incredibly rewarding experience.
Absolutely. And Maynard has so much to offer, so many, programming, great schools, beautiful downtown. There's obviously challenges the town has, everything from building new schools to water infrastructure to balancing the budget in a town that, while it has some industry, it's a small town. It doesn't have a massive, revenue base, and I know that's been a challenge which you've spent a lot of time looking at, both advocating, quite honest with me, about more state aid, but also what can be done at the Maynard level. How has it been sort of managing those different challenges, and what sort of work have you done in some of those areas?
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. So first of all, I want to recognize again, there's that 40 group of people, but we're coming up on a difficult budget year, and just the other weekend I was at the Mass Municipal Association, and it's good to know we're not alone. There are some significant challenges. Revenues simply don't keep up with the growth of expenses, but to see the other members of different select boards and finance committees has been good to let me know that we're not alone in facing these challenges, and that we also have allies across the state who are dealing with the same ones, looking for creative solutions. I will say, I think here in Maynard, we've really come a long way in the last 5 years about aligning on really just what the baseline facts are, and then from there we might not agree on what to do next, but it's become, once you get that base level alignment, it's a more civil conversation, and you can bring it from just kind of a high level floaty conversation to a more, all right, here are the tough decisions that we're going to have to make because of the tough environment that we find ourselves in.
Sure.
And they're not fun decisions. You're never going to find a compromise on these things that keeps everybody happy, but it's important to do it transparently, and it's important to do it respectfully, and we've done that. And we're looking at some significant shortfalls this year in some key departments. Just came out of a budget subcommittee meeting on Wednesday. It was 2 hours, and the numbers, they don't look great. We're going to have to make some tough decisions at town meeting this year, but I came out of that meeting and I could see the multiple years of some of the tri-boards that we've aligned on, where we bring together the school committee, the FinCom, and the select board. We've brought in more of capital planning so that we can do more long-range forecasting. I've done a lot of work looking at peer communities analysis to see where Maynard looks similar to towns that are not geographically close to us, but what are they doing? What is a single town school district with about Maynard's population and income per capita? What do they look like, and what can that tell us about where we are off or on? And so all of those things have come together to lead to not necessarily solving the problems, but at least putting in a base layer from which all of the members of the Finance Committee, the School Committee, the Select Board can start to work together and come forward with one approach. So it's going to be a difficult budget season, but I'm very proud of the progress those teams have made as they've come along and as we go into it for this fiscal year. Absolutely.
And so you have that challenge in front of you. Over the past couple of years, there's been a new fire station. I know Green Meadow Elementary School is under construction. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
You did a tremendous amount of work on that, and really compliment you on your leadership to move to the all electric model and move away from fossil fuels. Talk to me about that experience, because that's so important for every community when they're looking at new municipal or school buildings, is that opportunity to do our part to combat climate change.
Yeah, so I'll take a step back, because I think one thing that really enabled us to get there was the formation of the Sustainability Committee here in Maynard, which we did not have when I stepped up to the Select Board. And a good friend of mine, current co-chair of the Sustainability Committee, Kate Wheeler, came to me and we started pitching ideas. Is this something, is there a need for it? Do we have the technical expertise for it? Is it going to gain traction? And when we started putting down, brass tacks, here's what it would do. Do we have the expertise? Oh my God, we have so much expertise in this field within this town. And can we get it integrated into the town system? The answer was yes, yes, yes. And so we worked hard to pick a good balance of individuals who were in touch with Green Maynard, one of the non-town groups that does a lot of work in that space. A lot of people who work on this technically, professionally, a lot of people from academic backgrounds working on this, people from leadership backgrounds and different experiences, all of whom live in Maynard, and we put together just a fantastic group of individuals who have worked not just on the Green Meadow School and the sustainability issues there.
Yeah.
We're looking at community choice aggregation. That's a multi-year program to get that through. That means significant cost savings for towns that implement that across the state. So we've been pushing that, and I know the state has made some changes recently to get those programs through more. So I'm excited to see that come to Maynard quite soon. So that's something we started several years ago through that committee. They're applying for grants, things where we can more effectively use resources. I believe there's a grant application due today for a municipal energy manager that they came and the Select Board approved of.
Which I just have to note, that's something that I sent out to all my towns about to let them know. So,
Thank you. And there's so many grants and we're a small town, right? And some towns have grant writing professionals, individuals that a bigger town has access to that, but we rely sometimes on volunteer boards and committees to get it done. So that's just a subset of the work that the Sustainability Committee has done. And really proud of that group and how they've come together. I'll get back to the school. I know I'm going on, but I gotta. And recently when I became chair, I shifted off the liaisonship. So every single board and committee we have a liaison on the Select Board, so that chair has somebody to go to if they need to.
Sure.
And I transitioned away the Sustainability Committee off of me into my good friend Mike Stevens when he joined the board. God, that was a year and a half ago now. That's time moves in funny ways. But to see them, for the first year I stood them up, I was very active and attended all the meetings with them, and then to kind of let them go, and they took their own role, and now they're acting independently and working with Mike in new ways. It's fun to have a sustainability committee that's not only stood up, but now several years later, it is a sustainability committee. So they've really taken flight, and to stand up a new committee that way is just, it's a fun thing to do, and to really bring together some smart and creative people is always a fun thing to do.
That is great.
Yeah.
And what will the school, tell me about some of the features of the school, because sometimes what is a green school, or,
No, it was, it's all electric was the big thing. The geothermal heating system, I think, was probably the biggest point of topic there. And that's probably the biggest one that was the debate at the time that I'm particularly proud of. But there's other things beyond just the energy source. So when we move from, say, old style gas boilers to more electric systems, there's air quality benefits of that. You get cooling instead of just heating there, right?
Yeah.
And as temperatures increase and as that summer season grows into the fall, in the spring, we're going to need cooling systems for these schools as well. And then there's energy costs. So there's a lot of prediction as we, as a society, need to shift away from fossil fuels on whatever timeline that, those kind of infrastructure, as we go off of gas and move to electric, we're going to see spikes in electric, spikes in gas costs, because a lot of the pricing, it's not in the gas itself, it's in the infrastructure. And so as we stop developing that, the remaining gas customers pick up more of that bill. So there's just a lot of different intricacies in that. But the school itself is going to be all electric. Geothermal wells are going to be a big part of that. They're already been boring into for the current school.
And I've seen that at the Acton Elementary School from a couple years ago. It's really impressive.
Yeah, and I want to credit Acton for the great work that they've done in that field. And I was in communication with the Acton Select Board members, and they were a great resource during that time as we were figuring out what's possible and what works and what does not, and they've connected us some fantastic resources. So really appreciate the support that Acton has provided us as we went through that process just after them. So
that is great. So thank you so much for sort of turning the ship, if you will, on that issue. Really appreciate it, and the partnership with all the different groups that worked on that. I know that you've also been a real advocate around affordable housing, including the inclusionary zoning, I believe, and if you could just talk a little bit about what that means in Maynard for adding a little bit more affordable housing in town.
Yeah, there's several pieces of that. There's a lot of groups, as you know. I'll credit my other colleague, David Gavin, who sits in our Affordable Housing Trust, and he's been a good advocate for that as well. And the planning board has been fantastic. So inclusionary zoning, as you just mentioned, as you know, the affordable housing is at that 80% medium income, and the planning board, and with my full support, has now started bringing 60%. So even more affordable housing into developers' plans, so that they have more tools that they can work with new things coming in. So it's
and I do really want to emphasize that because we've talked about this for years. Is that obviously under Chapter 40B, there needs to be there should be 10% of all housing units be affordable, but the affordable definition is 80% of the area median income, and the reality is that's on the higher level. And my focus has been, as much as that is important, is what are we doing for those that are less well off, for working class families, sometimes people with disabilities. What are we doing to build more truly low income housing? And so that's where I appreciate you working on the 60% AMI, because that is going to reach more sort of vulnerable residents in Maynard, whether seniors, people with disabilities, people who are low income.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I couldn't have said it better myself, but you're more polished at speaking to that than I am. So appreciate the highlight and the importance of that one.
No, thank you. But the inclusionary housing and zoning, I think sometimes people don't know what that means. So what is inclusionary housing?
So when we have a new developer come in, we have a minimum amount that meets that threshold for affordable housing. That's included in that. So that means that every new development, we're getting closer and closer to that target threshold. And actually, Maynard has clicked up closer and closer. So we are now 2 units shy from that 10%
2 units
threshold,
short.
and we've got projects in the works now. So we go from, I don't remember where we were a few years ago, but from 8.5 to 9 to 9.5 to 10% of our housing stock includes those affordable units. And inclusionary housing means we don't slip backwards on that. We're always including that and moving forward in our housing production plans, which is another element that we work on continuously updating those and looking for opportunities anywhere.
And that includes the former Gruber Furniture's, Gruber Brothers Furniture, right?
Right, and those were added to the inventory, and that should be opening soon. The Coolidge School.
That's great.
Yes. We can talk about water infrastructure in a bit, but right now the focus is on a lot of former town buildings that are no longer in use, that we can convert into housing and help make small gains in towards meeting our 10% benchmark there, and beyond, and hitting that 60%. So Coolidge School, 1 Summer Street, the old fire station, that sale was closed just a week or two ago.
Okay.
So there'll be a museum component and some housing on top. And then 6163 Summer Street, RFPs will be reviewed by the Select Board quite soon as well. So we'll take a look at that and the opportunities that parcel could afford for affordable housing as well. So all of these individually, some of them are bigger or smaller, but they start to add up, and you just want to make sure you're making progress in the right direction
Sure.
Especially because for big projects for Maynard, that water infrastructure is a limiting
Yes.
factor right there.
And so on that note, because obviously this housing does take water infrastructure, and I hear that from a lot of my communities, especially around the MBTA Communities Act. But yeah, what is the state of Maynard's water infrastructure, and where has there been progress, and what do you see as needs, including, you know, really from the state? I mean, the state, I agree, needs to provide more support.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to housing on one thing.
Oh, sure.
One thing,
Yeah.
ADUs, which our planning
Yes,
board
yes.
passed just in advance of the state law passing it. So, but that's very important, especially for families my generation who might have to take care of kids and then adults at the same time. It offers more flexible living arrangements, often for seniors as well. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes,
Yeah.
which an apartment that can be built attached to a single-family home.
Yeah,
right?
and we did have a law that allowed that, or a bylaw that allowed that. This allows more flexibility, so it
Great.
encourages and allows more homeowners to take advantage of that sort of arrangement. And then the state was right there behind us as well. And then before I go back to your water and infrastructure question, a lot of those things I mentioned and the MBTA Communities Act, a lot of support at town meeting for these initiatives.
great.
So that's great work by those different organizations, including the planning board, very strong planning board, and just it's good to be backed by the whole community when we bring these up for town meeting votes. So there's good discussions around them. I know other communities does not go as well, so I'm very proud to be from Maynard when I see the results of those votes.
That is great.
Yeah.
That is great.
All right, give me
Lots of
your water.
housing
Give me your
so
water
right.
and infrastructure question again, and I'll answer it. I just wanted to make sure we touched on those points.
Well, yeah, what is the, because I think sometimes, you know, Acton and Maynard being more dense communities, you know, sometimes people think, oh, water infrastructure is all set. You know, you have public water systems. The challenge is, at least for my district, the Boxboroughs, the Harvards that don't have, you know, public water. But Maynard does have water infrastructure challenges. So what are those challenges, and what sort of is the plan, if you will, to address that?
Yeah, and it's interesting how you call Maynard out for being dense, because if you look at communities of Maynard size or below, we are the densest community of 10,000 or 11,000 people in the Commonwealth by a significant margin. It's one of the ways that Maynard is a particularly unique town, and it's kind of hard to find peers. So we're nestled here in a very tight area. We got the great wildlife refuge, which takes up about a quarter to a third of the town's area. So that density offers some bonuses, including walkability. It offers some challenges, but on water infrastructure, we've been behind. We've been behind, underdeveloped, and former select boards have had to make some very tough decisions. This has often been it's been a more affordable community than the communities surrounding it. And to try to keep that affordability, we have underinvested in our water and sewer infrastructure. And I want to credit our current DPW director, Justin DeMarco. He's been instrumental in providing the detailed analysis and working with successive members of the select board to start to reinvest, right? And when you've fallen behind a bit, you can't catch all up in 1 year. Some of that's permitting from the state, but also you can't just jack water rates up and catch up all at once. So you want to make sure you're not falling behind or not keeping pace, but starting to get ahead of that water infrastructure. So about 5 or 6 years ago, just before and then when I joined the board, long-range planning started, and we've been executing on that. So the first part of that was the well 4A treatment plant. That should be opening any day if it's not open already. We had like one final approval at the select board meeting, just the most recent one. So that's the first plan. Rockland.
And what will forgive me, Jeff, what will that do? How will that help?
So first of all, there's it's redundancy of our current capability, right? So we've been at a fair amount of risk where if critical systems go down on a high use day, then we're at risk of not being able to provide water. And that's just something we cannot afford to not, we cannot allow a situation where a resident turns on a tap and no water comes out. So to have multiple points of failure and to have extra capacity on water capacity reduces the risk of something catastrophic happening. So we're getting out of that. And then eventually in the long run, that's the water treatment, right? So that's just making sure we take the water and it's clear of bacteria and viruses and safe for usage. Now there's the issue of just the amount of water that we're able to pull from the ground. And so that's phase 2. Which will be the Rockland Ave well source. which we'll be going through permitting with the state and putting a new well there to now increase, we've got the treatment capacity, now we need the water capacity, and on the side, and we can talk about this, is sewer, which is going to be bolstered by some MassWorks grants right there.
Sure.
And then there's longer term phase 3. We can talk about MWRA. There's other well sources that are longer further out. That would depend on state interaction and support, and we've talked about that. So if it's possible for an extension, that's great. It looks like the state may go off to some of the communities closer in towards Boston. But if not, that kind of changes the course of what we would be able to develop in Maynard, and that's 15, 20, 25 years. So we're thinking about these issues in a very long-term way. Right now, we're getting our treatment capacity and our water capacity up just to make sure we don't have a critical failure point here, and really playing catch-up for some of the development that's already been done, especially around Maynard Crossing and in the Market Basket area and some of those residential areas, and to support those small projects I mentioned earlier in our conversation.
Sure. And you had mentioned the MassWorks grant. So recently there was a MassWorks grant for the powder mill station.
Yes, and that's for the sewer pumping, and there was some town meeting activity around that as well at the last town meeting. And so that's the sewer capacity as well, so we can't forget about that. It's fun to think about clean water going out, but coming in, but the stuff going out, it has to be processed and cleaned and treated as well, so that we're keeping our rivers safe.
And that can open up economic development, perhaps housing on Powder Mill Road.
Yeah, so we're going to have to process that. So if we don't have grants like that, we have to draw it from residents, and that's often their sewer and water rate bills go up, or we have to pull from services, and none of those are comfortable conversations. So that allows us a lot of flexibility to not do that. I think that was a $500,000 grant, so very much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, despite the housing production, and I really will commend Maynard for building a good amount of housing in the downtown, which often doesn't happen. Sometimes you just sort of see sprawl in suburban communities. The biggest demographic or fastest growing demographic in Maynard, I think, still is seniors. And I know there's been a very long discussion about a senior center. There obviously is a council on aging senior center now, but it's at the Maynard Golf Course. Where are things at right now with respect to, more of an updated senior center, if you will?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of individuals advocating for this for over a long period of time. It's, unlike a school or a police department or fire department, there's not a mandate from that for the state. The state's not going to come and take that into receivership like it would for other districts on a school or a water department or something like that. So it's been new spend as well in terms of expenses. So it's been a tough battle for those seniors, but they've really come together in the last couple of years in terms of their advocacy and their strategy. There was a successful town meeting vote that was non-binding, so it was successful, and then it passed. One of our, he's now on our senior center task force, which we created in response to that. Jack McKean led that initiative and really demonstrated to the select board that this is a priority for the town.
Yes, definitely.
So we launched, and Chris De Silva was the chair at that time, and he stood up and worked to stand up a senior center task force to look at the different options. I think one shift was there that a new construction was just not feasible based on the prices and the timelines and the economic conditions, so they shifted more recently to looking for leasing space. And that's been a hard-working committee, and they had a request for information so we could just get a little bit more information on the particular price points on there. And when I became chair, it was a priority for me to figure out how this could actually make it through town meeting. Not necessarily saying that we're going to do it, but we had a lot of kind of points where the budget cycle would go through, and select boards would say, well, not this year, or you got to do this, or we should wait for the results of this study. And I wanted to be very deliberate this year. So if we're going to say no, right, let's just make it a very deliberate decision to say no. And if we're going to say yes, let's make sure we're presenting that and we know all the information behind it. So we backed out the timeline. What would it take for this upcoming town meeting to do that? And I sat down with the town administrator and worked that out. And we said, all right, well, here's town meeting. Before then, we need a warrant article. Before then, we want to have a good estimate of the cost so we can have conversations about how that warrant. Before then, we need to back up a few months and have an RFP out. And before then, we need to have the select board discuss that RFP and have a couple weeks or even a month for that. And before that, we want the COA and that senior center task force to really analyze and come and make a solid recommendation. And so we backed that timeline out, and then we played it out, and senior center task force came, and they've presented and brought the RFI, and the Council on Aging came. This was in conjunction and timed with a senior needs assessment that Representative Hogan helped provide funding for, so that was coming out at the same time. It was important to me not to wait for the full analysis of that, just because I didn't want to wait another town meeting cycle to get through it. So asked our Council on Aging to come forward with a proposal last fall. Made sure we had plenty of time. The Select Board likes to debate and consider major proposals and do the approval at a subsequent meeting. It's important for us to go back and to kind of synthesize that with everything else. So built in enough time for that. And then I said to my board, I said, all right, we're going to ask the town administration to put an RFP out for a senior center lease. And I don't want the board to direct them to do this if you're not actually going to put your money where your mouth is come this budget cycle, or if you at least think there's a reasonable chance of doing that. And I think the board took that very seriously. We unanimously directed the town administrator to start that process, and the RFP process for that leased senior center space based on the proposal from the Senior Center Task Force that was approved by the Select Board, or directed the town administrator to start that last December. It was out now, and it's due today. So the proposals are in. I know I was in the town administrator's office just yesterday. I saw one proposal was in. We'll see if, I think there's a few more in there. So we'll see what those proposals come back on. That doesn't mean it passes, but that means it's going to get a fair shot. It's a difficult year, as I said. But it's going to come up at the joint budget review, and I hope you'll be able to join us on February 8th for that. It's already been in topics. We just talked about it Wednesday when we had our last budget subcommittee meeting, and there's a lot of eyes on that, and I'm proud of the work that all these groups have done to get it to this point where we're going to have some accurate price information, and we'll be able to take that into these next conversations and say, if this is what we want, this is what it's going to cost, and here's the trade-offs from everything else we want. And it's been a much more prominent part, and it has a real chance of happening. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it's
much
something
more real than before.
We've got for decades. The RFP it closes today. We'll have the information. We'll have actual price points to work with as we go, and the Select Board and the Finance Committee meet at the joint budget review on February 8th. And School Committee is always invited to that. Capital Planning team, which has done some long-range planning, is there, and we know that our Senior Center Task Force and Council on Aging members will be there in attendance as well. And that'll be, again, there's going to be some difficult discussions, but we've got all the information we need to make some clear yes or no decisions, and I'm looking forward to leading that team and having those discussions as we walk into a difficult budget cycle.
That is great. Well, it shows you an incredible amount of detail to move forward on just one project. So that's very impressive.
It's the detail, but like I said, starting planning that as soon as I became chair with the town administrator, and making sure that we set that timeline, and that we very clear, and very appreciative of my fellow board members for coming in and making it very clear that we're going to go forward with this RFP, with the intent that it has a real stake at conversation here as we walk into the budget cycle. Doesn't mean it gets in, but it's got a shot, and it's part of the conversation there. And we know a lot of our constituents have been advocating for that. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to include that into some of the upcoming packages that we'll talk about.
That is great. That is great. I know that you've got a lot looking ahead in the spring and the rest of the winter. Any other projects or things you wanted to highlight that you're working on these days, or?
There's always a million things going on. There's big and small things. I mean, I've got a punch list with the town administrator that we cover every week, and it's anything from electric vehicle charging stations, which we came down and need to get back up, so that'll be coming back up. There's water quality issues that we talk about, and so we know there needs to be a better education component about that. So we've had Justin DeMarco at a couple of Select Board meetings, so looking at some of that long-range planning that we enacted 5 or 6 years ago. Can we better explain that to the community? And then one thing we've done, especially as I think about the run-up to the town meeting. Last year, you know, I authored a message from the select board. We put that at the front, and it was just very clear. Here are the major projects coming up.
Sure, right.
Probably one of the biggest is there's a DPW garage. If you walk by on the rail trail, you can see it's not in good condition, right? It's going to be a significant cost. We know it's coming up. And so we don't want to bring in all of these conversations to town meeting without letting them know, you know, here's kind of the picture as we see it for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So they have a clear understanding of what the asks are going to be of them. And so, you know, it was important for me to get that conversation out and have that budget message, budget focus, but really on the projects that we're doing. In advance of town meeting last year, and it was from the entire select board. So you know, sometimes I have to speak as me, individual member, and sometimes I'm trying to find the voice that can represent all 5 of us. And really proud of the group of 5 of us for being able to come and give a 1.5-page synopsis. Here are the big things that we see coming for the town. I want to upgrade that and start to bring more of that budget message and you know, to town meeting. So it becomes less of a here's the big, you know, picture that you've never seen before, and you know, you saw the big picture last year, and here it is updated for this year, and it becomes an easier conversation. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And again, a difficult budget year, and I know I keep saying that, but it's going to be an interesting cycle, and looking forward to, you know, working with some people and you know, really getting the facts out there and making some data-driven decisions and figuring out where we want to go as a community.
That is great, and it's perfect timing because, of course, Representative Hogan and I sooner or later will come before the select board to talk about the state budget picture, you know, what's looking good, what's looking challenging, and how we can best support Maynard. But I just want to thank you for your public service. You're really one of the most diligent municipal elected officials I know, and appreciate our partnership. So thanks so much for talking about your past work and also how you got to run for office, because it's so important for more people to run for these positions. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It is an honor to serve this town, and I could not do it with all of the dedicated people who come in, provide input, provide ideas, do a lot of background work, and it's a big team effort, and it's an honor and a privilege to help coordinate and influence the direction of this community with all those fantastic people.
Great. Well, thanks again, and thanks for checking in to my Beacon Hill update. I'm State Senator James Eldridge. Been talking to Jeff Swanberg, Chair of the Maynard Select Board, and thanks for checking in, and please look online for future shows. Thank you.